We're 10 games in to the Premier League season, and Tottenham Hotspur are top of the table. Let me say that one more time. Tottenham Hotspur are top of the table. Today, we debate, can they actually win the league, or is this just a little run they're going on? Roll the intro. The Lost in Possession podcast. If you are here for the first time, please do us a very, very quick favour and hit that subscribe button. It is absolutely free. But without further ado, particularly you Spurs fans watching, we will get straight on with the good stuff. As I said, we're 10 games into the Premier League season. Postecoglou so far is working miracles. Lost Harry Kane, top of the table and flying. Today we're going to get into it. Can Spurs actually win the title? Jamie, we'll kickstart things with you. What's your thoughts so far? And as a City fan, are you rattled by Tottenham Hotspur?
I'm very surprised at how they're doing, being sort of top of the table, 26 points, 4 points dropped, unbeaten, is not something you'd expect, especially when they've sold Harry Kane. Now, Paul Merson, said they were going to get relegated without Harry Kane. Once again, he's come up with a brilliant prediction that has been awful. I remember when he was called Kevin De Bruyne a complete waste of money, Yaya Toure a complete waste of money. He seems to just jinx things. I haven't heard him say a correct prediction, to be perfectly honest. But back to Spurs under Ange, they've been brilliant, to be perfectly honest. Maddison has been signing of the summer. I think there's very few people who argue with that. And I think and he's also got the best out of Son when last season he just wasn't performing very well. And it looks like possibly without Harry Kane, Son's allowed to get more into it and be better. I think they also did well in the summer signings as well as Maddison. But as a City fan, am I actually rattled? Not yet. Not yet, but you also got to think they've got no Europe. They're out of the Carabao Cup. They've only got now the FA Cup and the league to focus on. So playing probably one game a week for most weeks. Why can't they mount the challenge? Arsenal managed to do it last season. Spurs could. Something, is in the water of North London, it seems. Getting the title challenges. And I'm hoping, it turns into a bottle like Arsenal last season as the Spurs we know turns up. But not rattled, but they are doing very, very well.
Yeah. And Reese, before you start, we've got to give you the shout out. Again, for those who aren't following us on TikTok, please do because you miss absolute gems like this. But Reese made his feelings very, very clear when Spurs lost Harry Kane. He said they'd thrive and didn't think they'd struggle without him. Reese, although it's Spurs, your prediction, you must be feeling pretty smug at this point.
Yeah, of course. You always want to be proven right, don't you? So it is an ego thing. They've got everything right so far. The appointment of Big Ange was the start. Completely agreed with it. I was a big fan of his work at Celtic, big fan of his work at Yokohama Marinos, and I thought this is a real chance for him to get it right. The signings have been perfect. The tactics have actually played to the players' strengths. They're not just putting in performances where I don't know. You just look at them and they have a real chance of winning. They've beaten Liverpool. They've beaten Man United at home. They've got a draw at Arsenal away. Bearing in mind they were behind twice. Yes, they scraped it against Sheffield United, but they showed a mentality that team has not shown in a very long time. So it's a real big progress for them. But I think where we'll see where we at and if they're going to have a title challenge at least is I think will be against Chelsea. I think that's the first real indicator, and not just winning the game, but the performance they put in, I think is important here.
I don't know. I'll be honest. It pains me to say, and I was saying this to a few people yesterday. I've never in my life, as a Chelsea fan, been less confident of us beating Spurs than I am for this next fixture. And to be honest, I slightly disagree in the sense that the way we've been and where we are in the table, Chelsea, it wouldn't be surprising if they beat us. You got to bear in mind they are in the best form they've ever been in my opinion. In the modern era. Appreciate it's only 10 games, but they are at the best, and we're arguably at our worst. So, in terms of the Tottenham Chelsea fixture, I don't think it would be an absolute shock to anyone if they beat us. Although, actually, weirdly, for Chelsea's point of view, our better performances this season have been against the big sides when we're not facing a low block. So I'm actually really intrigued to see how that game plays out. But I don't think that determines whether they're ready made for the title, unless maybe they lose and somehow we win. But I don't see it happening.
No.
But what you've got to look at is just the change in confidence, the complete and utter change in confidence. And I guess you have to credit Postecoglou for instilling that in them. And I think as well, I know you said you're a fan of him. A lot of Spurs fans, let's be honest, a lot of Spurs fans, let us know in the comments as well. Feel free to be honest. But I think a lot of them had doubts over Postecoglou as well. I didn't think his track record was that phenomenal. Celtic, Yokohama, it doesn't scream success, does it? It doesn't scream trophy winning manager. So I think there was a lot of doubts, but his character, his personality, a few signings, and it just maybe it is because Kane left, but there's just a newfound confidence. There's no fear in Spurs, and I think that at the minute they're looking great, and I think they could. We'll get onto it in a bit, but I don't see them slowing down unless they get some serious injuries.
I think we have to also, I know we've bigged up Spurs saying they're doing terrific, but you have to also look, 3 of the games are against 3 of the bottom 3. They've obviously, you said the Sheffield United game, Reece, and you've not seen fight like that before, but they did that versus Leicester. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where they scored 2 in the 90 added minute. So it has happened before where Spurs have pulled a result like that out. And also you've got to remember, Sheffield United had a man sent off. Liverpool had a man sent off, against them, and then they scored with a 97-minute own goal kind of scenario. The United game, in my opinion, there was a clear handball that should have been a penalty to United at 0-0, I think it was. So there is a little bit of luck riding in Spurs' way. However, it's nothing to go against their performances because the performances have been great, but it's not yet screaming we are title contenders just yet. And to be honest, I would have expected them to be getting more giddy than they have been. But Spurs fans are like, you know what, we're waiting. We're not getting overexcited yet. They were singing it though against Palace, singing "We Are Top of the League," and there are some other songs that were even more beyond that. But so they are doing well, but it's still not sort of like, it's not been perfect for them, and it's not been the most difficult run, if that makes sense. So I think the Chelsea game though isn't where the problem, like if they're away from home, I'd agree. I think that's where you see how our Spurs going to perform, because they have an awful record against Chelsea, especially at Stamford Bridge. So that's where I'd like to have seen that been the game. But at home, I'll be honest, I don't see Chelsea winning. I think I said the same for the Arsenal game. I said I only saw a draw as the best result, and it nearly was a Chelsea win. But Spurs, I think, that they're going to keep going. They're going to be up there, and I don't see how they don't get top 4 now, though. If they don't get top 4, something like there must have been big injuries, because I don't see them dropping off massively.
But the points gap isn't that big, by the way.
No.
So, although everything we're saying and we're talking about them, fighting for the title, the gap's not that big in terms of if they lose a few games. You know what I mean?
It's 10 games, so the points gap is not going to be massive.
Mm.
But a thing that Arsenal fans are not going to like. Spurs have had a better start than Arsenal did on the Invincibles season after 10 games. So you never know. Could be the Invincible Spurs
Imagine.
and even more points.
Well, this is it. Is like I think we've said that about their fixtures, etc. It is only 10 games, and look, Man United are poor. They beat Man United 2-0. The only reason I said this game is probably their biggest test isn't the word, because probably the Arsenal game was, and they came through that with the draw. Like I said, coming from behind twice, but playing Chelsea, I think Chelsea, who've still got a point to prove, they've shown improvements, and then they've let it drop, so they're going to be up for this one, because really Chelsea need to win this as well. I only said this because I think I look at the Liverpool game, and they got a goal right at the death. Whether you agree with the VR decision or not, it's irrelevant. They got it at the death, so it'd be interesting to see if they can beat Chelsea, 1-0 comfortably, or play them off the park 2-0. Do you know what I mean? You can't win last minute every single game. So it'd be interesting if we see a convincing performance, then we might see a little bit more. But what will worry Spurs is I think there could be a few injuries away from a crisis, but also they've played Man U, Liverpool, and this will be Chelsea at home. They'll still have to play them away from home.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And with let's talk. I guess let's break down the success so far. We've talked about obviously mentality. The confidence does seem to be there, but we got to talk about Maddison. Jamie, you've said signing the season so far. I can't really disagree with that. Reece, do you agree with that first and foremost?
What with Maddison?
With Maddison being the signing of the season?
Yeah, without a doubt. But he fits Spurs' style of play. That's and I think that's why it shows. Bring the players in that fit your style of play, and you'll probably see you actually do all right.
Yeah. He's been the key, and I think again we don't want to call him a one-man team because we did that before, and clearly we looks like we'd be proven wrong. But he is the one link in the play from that midfield to the attack, and they've not had a player really that's done that before. And I think they've definitely not got a player who can do that if he gets injured. So I think in terms of asking the question, what could derail this Spurs run? I think an injury to Maddison probably would do it. I was going to say, yeah, he's been unreal.
Yeah, they'll have to change tactically. I think, like I said, when they lost Kane, it meant they just weren't going to keep passing the ball to him for no reason. They've actually got options. So I think they'll be fine. They can cover for it. They might not be as creative, so they might have to grind out a 1-0. And that'll be different. But I think the most of it comes down to Ange Postecoglou, to be honest. He's an excellent speaker. He's very level-headed. He's not like I think Mourinho and Conte were, where they would cause the division by blaming everyone but themselves. Yes, they were right in some aspects, but he's gone in there and he's freshened it up. I think a lot of that squad now seems like a new team. Spurs, I think, had an issue of having a lot of players there for a long time, but none of them had won anything. So if you're going to be successful, why do you want the core of your players to have never achieved anything and have all thrown it away when it counts? But it's only really Ben Davies that's the only one there for that long period of time, and Son. So they've freshened up, and they've freshened up at the time they needed to. So yeah, and a lot of it has to come down to the manager, because I think he's been a breath of fresh air.
I do think what you're saying is kind of right with the injuries, Jordan, but you can say that with a lot of teams, really. So that's sort of like, it can happen. It can completely derail your season with big injuries. But you can say it with a lot of teams. There's not many teams who can get through it with these big injuries. And you'll normally see sort of Arsenal last season. I don't remember any massive injuries to their key players who were performing well. You had Jesus up front, who did get an injury, but he weren't actually scoring the goals anyway, so I actually didn't think it meant as much. But you don't normally get big injuries when you have a very good season. So for Spurs to have a good season, they've got to stay fit. It's something that it just has to be done, really. I also think, though, what sort of a positive for Spurs in a way is Richarlison is still not on form, so he can massively improve. And I don't think Kulusevski has been that great either. I think his best period was his first 6 months before they got him, and so they can. I think they can still improve, which is sort of exciting times for Spurs, really, because if they're doing this well and they've got players who are not fully firing, then they can push on. I'm not saying both of them have been terrible, but I think they've not shown the best that they can do. So I do think that's something that's a positive for them. But it does seem like a Madison Son is the main two. Well, especially attacking. With one of them missing, they probably don't look as great. And I think the lack of sort of squad showed in the League Cup when they played Fulham. And that's effectively why they went out. Okay, it was penalties, so it wasn't like a normal defeat. But that shows there is a bit of the lack of depth. But that's where other players will need to step up in case that happens. But they are playing one game a week, as I said earlier, so they don't have to worry about it as much. They're not playing every other sort of 2 games a week like City are, like Arsenal will be as well. Sort of like, it's actually a bit of a blessing that City are out of the League Cup too for me personally, because they're not playing this week. They can actually have a week's worth of training. So that's what Spurs will benefit from. But I don't think you can. It's sort of like they still need to focus on like the cups, really, in my opinion. They should take the League Cup more seriously. The FA Cup, I understand why it happened in the Fulham game, and just still trying to find his best team and wanting to give other players a chance. But sometimes you're going to have to just play your best team to try and win anything, because Spurs want that trophy drought over there. Like, they want it gone massively, probably more than anything else.
Well, to your point about winning trophies, like the way you win trophies is winning 5 or 6 games in a row and beating a few big teams in the way. And that's literally what they've done in the first 10 games. They've been on good form, beat big teams, and not lost. Like, that is how you win. On this form, they could win a trophy. Like,
you can't ask for anything better right now. Like, you can't,
yeah.
without being fully greedy about the 2 draws. So yeah, I do fully agree with that. That's how you show it. But it does come down, because, like I say, it comes down to the business season, when it's February, when it's March, because at this point last season, Arsenal were doing roughly the same. But when it came down to the main time of season, the February, Marches, like I say, they slipped up. So that's why I'm not rattled. As you sort of your first question to me was, because it's not near the business end of the season, but it doesn't mean they can't get there. Because, like I said, I think the 1 game a week is massive for them, especially learning under Ange. Because, to be honest, at the start of the season, I thought they'll need a little bit of time before getting going. But clearly I was wrong on that. But it means they could also continue to improve. And it's good. And it's also good football from Spurs. Whereas Mourinho, Conte, it was boring football. Spurs fans would all say it was dull, boring. They weren't excited to watch their team. And if you think about Spurs fans, when they were most excited was under sort of Harry Redknapp, when you had, or just when in the Champions League with Bale running down the wing, and Lennon running down the wing as well. And it was just that attacking, exciting football. And that's all I think Spurs fans wanted. That's all they wanted, because of the dross they've seen under Mourinho and Conte.
Well, they've got the players to do it. And this is what I'm saying is, last season they had the players to do it, but that wasn't the style he wanted. Same with, don't get me wrong, Mourinho did get Son and Kane in the form of their lives. Let's not forget that. But again, yeah, it was still quite dull. Whereas he's brought the players in that play to the strengths, players that can play with the ball, players that like to, have a touch or two. He's encouraging players to get forward, and that's why it's so important. But yeah, I'd agree. It's when it's the business end of the season that matters. If we look at some of their last games, their last 2 games probably don't need to worry too much. They're at home to Burnley and away to Sheffield United. But before that, they're, just before that, they're away to Liverpool, they're at home to Arsenal, they're at home to City, they're away to Newcastle, and they've got West Ham away in there along those lines as well from April alone. That's going to be a test, and I think this is where I've said the same. This is why I always said Arsenal were going to collapse at the end, because there were games in there where I was going, these teams have too much to fight for, that's going to strike fear into you. So yes, get the points now, because going away to, Newcastle on 13th of April, if Newcastle are desperate for that top four, they're going to give you a game. If they've already got it, doesn't matter. But
well, we've been wrong to say Newcastle are on the beach, even if they're not. So Newcastle, like they showed you 2 seasons ago, they'll be up for it. So
I was never wrong about them being on the beach.
No. It was.
I said they were on the beach last season though, because they got what they wanted. So this season could be different, and we probably won't know a little bit more for a while. But they do have a nice little fixture list as it stands. There's nothing where you look at it and you think, oh no, we're going to probably be playing some strugglers here. It looks like Sheffield United will be dead and buried by then, by the last game. So they'll probably thank their lucky stars there. But at home to Burnley, second to last game could be a different story, depending on what Burnley need to do and if Burnley have clicked. So Liverpool away again, that they're going to be out for revenge after how they felt in the last game. So
it could be over by then.
Well, yeah.
But Liverpool might be competing at a similar level, or Liverpool, like I said, will want revenge for being screwed over.
Maybe we're getting too far ahead of ourselves here.
No, we are, but there are all things you have to consider. There are things you have to consider about where we think this team are going to be.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And look, to make the case for them, I guess, how many times last season did we say with Arsenal, it's just a bit of momentum, they're getting a bit of luck, new manager, not a new manager, but like, a few new signings and what have you. But Arsenal, based on what Arsenal did last season, they're the ones kind of making me think that Spurs could actually turn this into, a 20-25 game sort of run, if you like. But I said it pre-season, I really thought they'd struggle with Postecoglou coming in without Kane. Maddison was a good signing, but I didn't think he was going to absolutely run the league. So the fact they're even here at this point is quite surprising. But now I'm seeing it. Now I'm seeing how they're playing. It's the same vibe. It is. Arsenal won't like to be compared to them. Spurs probably won't want to be compared to Arsenal either. But it's the same energy as last season. The fans are in love with the club again. They're loving it. You see all the celebrations every game they win, like they've just won the league. Beers flying everywhere. You see the videos on social media. Like, the love for the club is coming back, and that's what it was with Arsenal last season. And when you're playing well on the pitch, your fans are loving off the pitch, there's no real owner drama. It can cause a bit of a recipe for a ridiculous run. So on that basis, I can see Spurs doing exactly what Arsenal did last season and pushing City, giving them a bit of a sweat. Do I actually think Tottenham Hotspur are going to win the league after 38 games? Absolutely not. But they could make it interesting, and they could do what Arsenal did and push to that next level.
I think we also got to look at the Spurs team, because what I think they've done has sort of fixed the spine of their team, really, by putting Maddison in, like we've mentioned. Son's kind of up front or left wing, but the new goalie, he's fit in perfectly. I think I think personally, I still think he's got a little bit of doubt on the ball, but I've also watched him pull off some brilliant saves this season, and you don't always get that from goalies. Look at Onana at United. It's not been perfect for him. He may turn out to be a good signing, but at the start, the pressure went and he made a few errors, whereas it's been the opposite for the Spurs keeper. You've got, Van der Veer? Van der Veer. He's been brilliant. And what he's done is also, I think it's kind of what City used to have when we had sort of like the Stones company, sort of different. So it was more like Stones Otamendi. Otamendi would be the rash one who jumps in, also an Argentinian. Romero is the one who will jump in. Van der Ven, won't. and that kind of works well as a good centre back partnership. I think Basuma's come in, and he was a forgotten player really last season. Like Conte wanted nothing to do with him, and he's come in and he's looked very good. Kind of what people would have expected from him. So it's like Spurs have sorted out the spine of their team, and that's what's really helping, I think. It's sort of like doesn't seem to be a massive weakness in Spurs, whereas before we'd be like, you know what, Lloris is going to make a mistake here or there. Romero's going to get sent off because he's always having to jump in, and no one else is really. He used to have, I think it's Ben Davies was the centre back partnership with him. That's not a good partnership to have. Whereas Van der Ven's come in and sort of he'll shore up the defence a bit better, and that allows Romero to do what he does better without making all the rash challenges.
I think Romero has, to be fair to him, calmed down a bit. You're not seeing those yellows as much as you were last season. You're not seeing those crazy acts or whatever.
No, because he's not making as many of them tackles, if that makes sense, because he doesn't need to. Because you've got the centre back pairing, he's not being told to make every tackle.
Yeah,
because that's what's needed. Otherwise, you haven't got the other proper centre back pairing. So that's where I think it does help him. But yes, Ange has probably gone to him. Calm down. I don't need you making a 2-footed tackle in the 90th minute for no reason, or headbutting someone or something stupid. So yeah, I think that possibly that has come into it. But I think Spurs are looking very good right now. It's just, I don't know. It's like, are all of these players just a bit too much on form, and will there be a drop off? But like you said, Jordan, Arsenal, you kind of thought that last season, but they didn't. They had a very good season. Okay, didn't win the title, but pushed City pretty much until the final 2-3 games of the season.
Yeah, and even with Arsenal last season, we said the same thing about injuries, and you saw a couple of times when their key players did get injured, albeit it wasn't loads, but the subs, because of the momentum, because of the confidence, because of everything I just said, even the players coming in had so much belief, no fear, that they ended up being really good as well. So we could just see the same thing happen at Spurs this season. And I guess before we've talked about how good the squad is this season, we've got to touch on Harry Kane very quickly. Spurs' greatest ever player, arguably. Record scorer. People might disagree with that already. But he leaves. Spurs are now top of the table, flying best they've ever been. He goes to Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich are not top of the Bundesliga. Is Harry Kane to blame?
No, not at all. Not at all. Bayern will win that league. You got Leverkusen, who are on absolute top form. They're like, I'm more certain them dropping off than Spurs dropping off. But it's not been the problem. I still think it could have worked with having Kane up top in this team. So no, I think he's a world-class striker. It would be some sort of like weird world where you go, oh, Kane's been the best player, blah, blah, blah. He leaves, they go and win the league. It would be quite funny. Probably not for all of us, especially where we live. It's a Tottenham dominated area, so it wouldn't be fun for that aspect. Would stay indoors a bit more, I reckon. But no, he's not. He's not the problem. He's not a problem overall. He's a brilliant footballer, and most teams will thrive better with him in the team.
Reece, why did you know it was going to work then? I guess is the question for you.
Just someone who's looked at Ange Postecoglou's career. I know you touched upon it about his Celtic, doesn't really scream winner, but Celtic were in a really bad place before he took over, and he come in and he brought that enthusiasm, brought that attitude, and brought in players that, he took advantage of a market in Asia and Japan particularly, and just changed everything around. Yes, Rangers were terrible, but Celtic were that good. A couple of poor performances in Europe, yes, in fact, really bad. But he changed the vibe. Even at Yokohama, you know, they are a good team in Japan, but he made them better. And I think that's what's really important. If you hear a lot of players that have worked under him, they all speak very highly of him. And I think that's all Spurs needed. You don't need to have this, you know, top naming manager to come in and do the business if they're going to cause up a stink. You know, Pochettino is a prime example of that. He came in and revitalized everybody. So I think it was inevitable, especially with the signings they were making. They're making sensible signings, and you know, best of luck to them. You can't knock that, and hopefully some teams maybe actually realize what they're doing and actually take some inspiration from it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I guess before we wrap things up, we are releasing this before the Spurs Chelsea game. In true preview fashion, we've got to give our score predictions for the match. No, maybe let's leave the scorers because I'm not sure I can do that again. We'll just take that. We'll leave it there. Or they'll start calling me Mystic Mac. I'm going to go again to reiterate my earlier point. This pains me to say it, and first time in my life I've ever believed Chelsea will not beat Spurs. I'm going to go Spurs 2, Chelsea 1.
I'm going to go with 2-0 Spurs. Chelsea just don't score that much, to be perfectly honest.
Fair.
Yeah, 1-0 Spurs.
There you go. Well, let's hope at least.
God, that's
We all think we're going to lose. I think we're at least going to score a goal. We'll see. But as always, Spurs, Chelsea fans, and any other fans, let us know your score predictions in the comments and whether or not Spurs can win the title. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.
Here we go.